When Jesus was asked, which is the greatest commandment in the law, which scripture did he go to? Do you recall? He would have went to the Schema, as they say, Deuteronomy. And this is how it was posed to him in Matthew chapter 22 by a lawyer. In verse 35 of Matthew 22, a lawyer says to Jesus to test him, it says, in verse 36, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" So they wanted to know, in the law, what is the greatest commandment? And he said, verse 37, and he said to them, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." Then he said, "This is the great and first commandment." And then verse 39, "And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And on these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets." Now, isn't that interesting? This verse, this command that Jesus gave back to them, quoting Deuteronomy 6:5 and 6, answered their question, and it was correct. This is the greatest. Now the question then, though, is this: is that for believers? Are we trying to meet these requirements that these lawyers and religious leaders couldn't live up to in any way, shape or form this command? Are we supposed to do that? That's the question, right? Because every time you go to or listen to someone quoting these verses, they try to imply that this is what we need to do as new covenant believers. But think of the context where Jesus is preaching and who he's preaching to, and what are they trying to do? Remember, they're trying to test him about the law. The only person actually who could live up to that is Jesus himself. He is the one who fulfilled the law to the letter and to the dot. We can't. We could never do it. They couldn't do it. How in the world are we going to do it? Right? So this begs the question then, how can we love God more? Because that's the instruction we're getting from many people. How would you answer that? How can you love God more? My quick answer to that is, we've all heard we need to love God more and prove our love for him. Old Testament commanded that the greatest ways to love Yahweh or Jehovah was with your heart, soul and mind, and your neighbor as your oneself, as Jesus quoted Deuteronomy to the Jews under a covenant. But this concept is actually absent from the New Testament and the New Covenant. The New Testament scriptures never encourages a new-hearted believer, now get this, it never encourages a new-hearted believer to love God more. Why is that? Why doesn't it ever say that to you? Well, because we've already loved him to the utmost. We already love him to the utmost. 1 John 3:23, Romans 6:17, Ephesians 6:24. These are the three texts. Instead, the Bible encourages believers to grow in God's love for them. Ephesians 3:19. Now have a read of these texts, friends, and you'll see that we're under a different arrangement with the Father. With Yahweh it was different, but with the Father, who is separate from Yahweh, he doesn't demand that type of love. Under the new covenant, loving God is believing in Jesus and loving one another. Can we show that from the scriptures? Yes. 1 John 3:23 and 1 John 5:4. The beautiful reality of this new setup is that God hasn't demanded, the Father that is, hasn't demanded you to love. No, he's fixed it himself. How? Well, when you became a believer, he gave you a new heart, Ezekiel 36:26. He also pours his love into you, to that new heart, Romans chapter 5. So it's a beautiful way God has done it, because as an unbeliever, right, we had a dead heart, a stony heart, according to Ezekiel 36:26. So when we believe in Jesus, we are given a new heart and a new spirit, and we are thereby empowered to love God and other people. That is why. So you don't have a dirty heart. You don't have a treacherous heart. That's for the unbeliever. We once had a treacherous heart and a dirty heart and a stony heart. No more. 1 John 3:14, Galatians 6:10. Loving God is actually a perpetual state of being for a believer. The scripture says our love for God is an undying love because we have become obedient from the heart. Ephesians 6:24, Romans 6:17. These are scriptures we've already quoted. So we don't need to try to love God more. We don't need to do that. We love him with an undying love. And this is the Father, of course, I'm talking about, when we can rest in this reality. Instead, friends, we can wake up every day and grow in our understanding of his great love for us. Let me quote Ephesians 3:19 for you again. How can you love God more? How would you answer that today as a new covenant believer? Thanks for listening, friends. Another episode is coming up soon. See you later.